Welcome to the Redbird Report, your destination for the latest on the St. Louis Cardinals. Here are your hosts, BK and Tebow.
Welcome into the Redbird Report alongside Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. I think we have seen Dustin May's final start in a Cardinals uniform. No, actually, by the time you're listening to this, there's a decent chance that Dustin May has been traded by the St. Louis Cardinals. T-Bone, I think it's the right call. I understand where they're going with this, but man, I first want to give some props to Dustin May. I enjoyed the Dustin May experience in his time here in St. Louis. I didn't know how it was going to go. I liked the signing. We both did whenever they made the move. He's young. He didn't cost all that much money. The upside was certainly there. And the hope was this becomes the landing spot where you get to late July and another team's willing to bet on the profile. Big time velocity, has some other stuff that's at least interesting with the characteristics. Doesn't get a ton of swing and miss, but has pretty good strikeout profile because of how good he is at locating his pitches at times. But it was a matter of, is he going to be able to stay healthy, and does the velocity tick back up to where it was early in his career? Cardinals deserve credit. Dustin May deserves credit. That has all been the case for him. You look back at what he's been for his last 20 games or so, legitimately has been one of the more productive starters in all of Major League Baseball. So I think that experience is coming to its conclusion, but I'm glad we got... It's one of those, the old Dr. Seuss quote, right? Don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. And the Cardinals got a lot out of the Dustin May experience.
Boy, I wasn't expecting us to be quoting Dr. Seuss on the Redbird Report this week, but here we are. Look, I think this ended up being a really good signing for the St. Louis Cardinals. I mean, they got exactly what they needed from him in 21 starts, a 4.38 ERA. And honestly, the funny thing is that's still inflated from the first, 2 starts at the beginning of the year. He's going to get you an asset in return. And he did the job of kind of band-aiding things till you could get Quinn Mathews to develop in your minor league system, which it sounds like is going to be their next move once they trade Dustin May, or even if before they accomplish that trade. So it was a move that was for the first half of the season. He does his job, goes out there, starts, proves that he's got some value across the league. And now you basically bought a prospect, right? The $12 million you paid Dustin May was essentially to go buy whatever prospect you wanted at the deadline. And they should get a decent return for him because he has pitched well. Now, you're not going to get like a Scooble return because he's not a number one, but someone could put them in their rotation and start him in a game 3 or 4 this October and feel pretty happy about it. So I think it's the right call from the Cardinals to move on from him. I would have been open-minded to the QO, and I still am open-minded to the QO because that's what they have to do. They have to set the precedent of, hey, you've got to beat how we value the qualifying offer. If May were to walk away and sign somewhere else and we get that draft pick in the offseason, you've got to beat that from how we value it. And that's what they're going to be holding as the kind of standard in these conversations with teams around the league. But I do think someone's going to beat it, and they will ultimately trade Dustin May.
And I get why somebody would beat it. If you look under the hood a little bit on Dustin May's season, it's even better than some of the top line numbers would suggest. You mentioned the ERA on the year. That is so inflated because of his first 2 starts. If you pull those out, and they're outliers at this point, you look at it in his final 19 Cardinal starts, and this is not pulling out anything else, just the first 2 where he was a disaster and clearly did not have his command early on. 101 innings pitched, 3.5 ERA, and if you look even further under the hood, it's even better, 2.9 fielding independent pitching. And that means he got some pretty bad batted ball luck in some of these games, which matches the eye test of what we saw from him. You look at other pitchers in Major League Baseball that have had a worse fielding independent ERA than Dustin May over this span. It includes Garrett Cole, Logan Webb, Jose Soriano, Michael Wacha, Reed Detmers, George Kirby, Sandy Alcantara, Brian Wu. In other words, a who's who of guys that could potentially get dealt at the deadline, and Garrett Cole. So if you're a team that's trying to bet on this profile, you don't want to give up huge assets to go out and trade for a controllable starter like a Reed Detmers or a Jose Soriano. You don't want to give up massive, massive capital to go get Tarek Skubal. I get why you would bet on Dustin May. He could serve as a 3 or a 4. He gives you a representative start by the time you get to the playoffs. You feel pretty good when he's out there. He'll give you 5 solid innings. You turn things over to your bullpen. And man, you look back at the teams that have made it to the World Series in recent years, that's what they do. In their 3rd or 4th game of a series, they turn to somebody like a Dustin May. So it makes all the sense in the world. You're going to have to give up something but it's not the kind of asset that you'd have to give up for Detmers, Soriano, Skubal, etc. I think the Cardinals are probably making the right call here. I'm going to miss him, though. I'm going to miss watching him because he's super intense. He's got big-time velo, the likes of which, man, we haven't seen from a Cardinal starter, I mean, since Carlos Martinez or Alex Reyes when he was first coming
Flaherty,
up.
Maybe a little bit. He throws a little harder. Yeah, he throws a little harder than Flaherty.
It's been a rarity to see this kind of stuff coming out of a Cardinal starter's arm, and it's been really refreshing to be able to watch. And I think it serves as a reminder of what they're hoping to do in the future. This is the kind of stuff that they would like to have more of in their system.
Yeah, it's worked out great for him. I wonder if they'll consider trying to re-sign him in the offseason. I don't know what his contract will look like, because the other good thing, if you want to call it that, it's more from the May perspective, he can't get qualifying offered if he's traded, right? So whoever you send him to can't attach the QO to him. I wonder if the Cardinals have kind of done a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Hey, Dustin, you liked your time here. We liked your time here. We really could use another prospect for this build. Let's not end this conversation about you being back for the 2027 season. It could make some sense depending on what that contract could look like. I don't know what it'll look like, to be honest with you. There would definitely be a line for me to cut off on that, but you're right about someone could trade for him and he start like a game 3 or 4. Like, could he do what Fott did? He's a guy we always point to. I think he could. Maybe not as many strikeouts in that performance, but could he give you 5 solid innings and then turn it over to your loaded bullpen? Absolutely. And teams that are going to be looking for him are going to be teams like you said. They're not maybe looking for controllable arms, or maybe they've got reinforcements coming, right? Like, if the Cubs weren't in the division, I think he'd make a ton of sense for the Cubs. You've got Edward Cabrera coming back from his injury. He's your number 1. Then you could add Dustin May, like right there behind him as your 2 or 3.
I've got a few guys that could fit into this criteria. You mentioned, like, do you re-sign Dustin May going into the offseason? Part of it is, like, if you're Dustin May and you want to get a contract done before the CBA negotiations start up in earnest, this is probably a spot where you could get that done early in the offseason. And I'm guessing that the price will be basically what the Cardinals qualifying offer would have been, which is like the best of both worlds. You get a prospect for him for 2 months of his work that probably weren't going to be all that meaningful for you here. You get to see, as you mentioned, we'll get into this more here in just a moment, Quinn Mathews, and he gets to get some of these starts down the stretch. And then you still potentially get Dustin May back. But even if it's not him, I think there are other guys that can look at what Dustin May did with the Cardinals as proof of concept. They took a guy who was coming off of a pretty bad year, some health concerns, and needed to recoup some of his value to go out and get a legit contract in the future. And they allowed him to do all of those things. They gave him the opportunity. They assured him you're going to start every 5th day. They said they're going to stick with him throughout any of his struggles that he may have, and they're going to do everything in their power to make sure he stays healthy. And that includes reorganizing the rotation, potentially going to a 6-man at times, pulling him from games if it looks really bad. Like, all of that stuff happened. They followed through with the words that they said to Dustin May, and the results are he's one of the 20 to 30 best starting pitchers in Major League Baseball this year. That's valuable. And now other guys can look at that. And I'm looking at a few guys in particular that I think stand out for something like that this offseason. If you're Freddie Peralta and you want to recoup some of your value, you may look at this now as a pretty good spot to do so. A guy that I would keep my eyes on, and last year the guy that we mentioned this time of the year was Dustin May. I would keep your eyes on Kris Bubic as somebody from the Kansas City Royals, a left-handed starter who's dealt with a ton of injuries in his career, including this season, but he's got a 4 ERA this year. Last year, he was a all-star as a starter with a 2.5 ERA. If the Cardinals believe in his stuff, and I think they probably will, I think he would profile like somebody that they would believe in. He is somebody that I think they could do something similar with next year if they wanted to bet on another starting pitcher that's a little different with the kind of upside that Bubic / Dustin May have. Both of them were pretty big-time prospects at one point in time, too.
Yeah, and Bubic still fairly young as well. I mean, this is just his age 28 season, so he'll be 29 next year. I could see it for the Cardinals' perspective. He does not
throw hard, but he does get swing and miss.
Yeah, I don't have as much interest in him because I prefer to chase the velocity, so that's one reason I wouldn't do it. But
I get it.
I would get it if they made that signing and they went that path. But I think you're right. I mean, I think they're going to be in position to do another pillow contract this offseason, especially if they are maybe a little bit more active and maybe float the idea of trading one of their controllable starters, right? Maybe they just say, all right, we'll see what we can get for an Andre Palante. Mathews is a little cheaper, replaces him. And then we go out and we do another pillow deal and basically buy another prospect. So I think it makes sense, and I think they could explore that. I like the Freddie Peralta route. I think he still may get a more, depending on what happens in the second half, he may still be able to recoup some value because apparently a lot of teams think they can fix him. So he may kind of pitch his way out of that. Zach Gallen, another name that I would mention as a guy that's going to be searching for another pillow contract. I think this proof of concept, this used to be what they did when they had Dave Duncan running things as the pitching coach here with TLR, where they would bring in somebody that you'd look at and go, what do they see there? And the next thing you know, it'd be like a pitcher that's almost an all-star or is an all-star for the Cardinals. And they were able to do that this year, not to the all-star level for Dustin May, but they can sell that to other teams. And the fact that they've gone 2 straight seasons without having a starter go on the IL, now some may say it's luck, and I might be one of those that would point to that. They can at least sell that, though, as, hey, you need to stay healthy, and that's how you can recoup some value because you're a good pitcher. Come here. We've got a plan that we can really sell pitchers on, and that's what appealed to Dustin May in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing something right. Even if it is, like, good fortune is definitely part of it. But there's also something the Cardinals are doing right. Otherwise, you don't see this. I mean, they're taking on a guy in Dustin May who's never stayed healthy. And he was able to do it here. It's the only place in his entire career that he's been able to do it. And he's played for some good organizations that are known for pitching development. And it hasn't worked there. It did work here. I find that really interesting. Last thing on Dustin May before we move on to some bigger picture Cardinals conversations. I wanted to ask you about where he ranks among the Cardinals' best free agent signings in the last decade. Now, it is worth noting, it is quite embarrassing that Dustin May is even in the conversation because as much as I've enjoyed watching Dustin May this year, the fact that he is one of the better free agent signings by the Cardinals in a decade speaks to the lack of quality free agent signings that they have made. But if you go back to 2016, here are some of the notable free agent signings that they've made. I'm not saying these are the best, but like notable ones that they've made. 2016, they signed Sung-Won Oh. 2018, Miles Michaelis. 2019, Andrew Miller. 2020, KK. 2022, Steven Matz and Albert Pujols. 2023, Wilson Contreras. 2024, Sonny, Kyle Gibson, Lance Lynn. 2025, Phil Maton. And this offseason, it was Ryan Stanek and Dustin May. I've got my top 5 for you. Would you like to hear it?
Yeah, what do you got?
You want me to work from 5 to 1 or 1 to 5?
Let's do 5 to 1.
Okay. At number 5, the 5th best free agent signing of the last decade for the St. Louis Cardinals, I've got Sonny Gray at number 5. I think it was still a successful signing, and it's still paying off for the Cardinals by the fact that they were able to get real value in the trade for him. At number 4, Sung-Won Oh, one of the more underrated and unheralded moves that the Cardinals have made. He was worth 3 wins as a reliever. It was a 1-year contract. He had a sub-2 ERA in that first year. Now, the second year was not as good. That does not count as the first free agent contract. So just based upon that contract alone, a couple $1 million. He was one of the better relievers in baseball. Yeah, Sung-Won Oh, 4th best signing in the last decade. Number 3, Albert Pujols. Come on. The chase for 700, the unbelievable second half, got them into the postseason. He ended up being a 150 OPS plus that year. He was ridiculous. And yes, I am including some of the sentimentality. I think that's part of it. He was amazing to watch. I enjoyed every second of it.
Boy, 3 feels kind of low for Albert, but okay, let me see what 1 and 2 are.
Number 2, Wilson Contreras. I think it was a really good signing. Now, he did not become the catcher that you wanted, but he was hugely valuable, was legitimately one of their best hitters for multiple seasons, ended up being 30% above league average offensively in his time here with the Cardinals. As an offensive contributor, which is ultimately what they signed him for, Wilson Contreras was exactly what they hoped that he would be, and that very rarely happens with free agents. So I'll have him at number 2, and it was multiple seasons, whereas Albert was just really half of a season that he was able to contribute for. Now, this one's going to be unpopular, but I think it's objectively true. The best free agent signing by the Cardinals in the last decade was Miles Michaelis. His extension was bad. The original contract was excellent. He had a 3.5 ERA over his first 2 seasons and threw almost 400 innings in those first 2 seasons. And he signed for like $16 million. It was a 2-year deal worth $15.5 million. There's no way that you can argue that was a bad move in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it's one of the best bang for your buck pitching signings in all of Major League Baseball over the last decade. So for me, that's the number 1 move. I would have Dustin May, Phil Maton, and Kyle Gibson as the next ones up, 6, 7, and 8. but those would be my top 5. Number 1, Michaelis. Number 2, Contreras. Number 3, Albert. 4, Sungwano. And number 5, Sonny Gray.
So I would have probably Albert at 1. Just because of the impact that he had. I mean, he played like an MVP in the second half of the season. At the age of 40, you get the 700 home run chase. Also, probably a little bias for me because I grew up an Albert Pujols fan. So I would have that at number 1, and that was a 1-year contract. I do agree with you on the Michaelis front, though. I think that is probably second.
He was 6th in Cy Young that year.
I get the argument of putting him at number 1 because it was multiple years. That first contract for Michaelis was a hell of a steal by John Mozeliak. I mean, that was a great find overseas that they were able to get him for. He was awesome. And again, I've even mentioned this, even though I was really dogging him in this final year here in St. Louis. I think he might be a Cardinals Hall of Famer. That's how good he was for the Cardinals in that first year that first contract that he signed. And I think he's like, I could be wrong, I think he's like top 5, if not like number 1 in WAR for starting pitchers over the last decade for the Cardinals because he ate so many innings. So I agree Sugwano would probably be number 3 for me. Then it gets really tough for me because I don't think I would have Contreras top 5. And the reason I say that is I get what you're saying. They signed him for offense. They clearly didn't know what they were signing. And that shouldn't probably be against Willson Contreras, but I think it has to play into they signed him to be a catcher, and then they basically chased their tail for 2 years on what to do with catching. And they ultimately just end up trading him, and they never really got anything out of that contract outside of we'll see what ends up with the prospects they got in return for him. So I don't know that I would have him in my top 5. I would probably put Gray, May in my top 5, and then I would put the Phil Maton signing up there.
Dude, that was a great signing.
Maton was a steal.
Was amazing.
He was awesome for them in that like 37 game sub-3 ERA, and then they trade him at the deadline. They end up with Mason Molina, who's all the way up to AAA now as a left-handed starter. Like that looks like it could be one of those that is going to age even better as we get further along here, depending on how the rest of Molina's development goes.
All right, so that is the Dustin May of it all. What we have not discussed is what Dustin May being traded eventually means for the current St. Louis Cardinals. I want to get into that on the other side because I think we've had some breadcrumbs over the last couple of days on who could replace him and what it ultimately means in the big picture. We'll get into that next here on the Redbird Report. So Jeff Jones had an interesting tweet earlier today, T-Bone, and over the last 24 hours, we've had a lot of hints. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge by Ollie Marmol. And the latest one was pregame. The Cardinals originally said that Quinn Mathews was supposed to pitch on Thursday for the Memphis Redbirds. Well, they switched to that. Brant Thompson and Jared Schuster are now the announced starters for their doubleheader. Mathews does not appear on the weekend schedule for the Memphis Redbirds. Ollie Marmol, we're recording this prior to the end of the Cardinals game, but as of now has not announced who the Cardinal starters are for the weekend. He says he's going to update that rotation post-game. T-Bone, my expectation is you will see Quinn Mathews start for the Cardinals this weekend. Which day will he start? I don't know. My guess is Friday, where you just insert him into the rotation the day after he was supposed to start. It's possible you say we're going to bump him to Saturday, though, if you feel like he's comfortable doing so. You get him his sea legs with the team out in Toronto. Don't make him throw the first day that he travels. He comes out, throws a bullpen or something, just gets himself ready, and then Saturday he's ready to go. It's a day game on Saturday as well, so just buy yourself a few extra hours there. The other thing is that would be typically Matthew Liberatore's day. Now, two things could happen here. One, Libby just bumps to the next day, and he continues to throw as a starter for at least this turn through your rotation. Two, Libby could just piggyback him, and Libby now gives you the length coming out of your bullpen to where you don't have to worry about your bullpen getting a day that or getting fried that day. So those are two different options there. That also means, in the event that you push anybody back, Dustin May's day gets pushed back. He's currently your announced starter for Monday, August 3rd. T-Bone, do you know what Monday, August 3rd is?
That would be the trade deadline.
It is indeed. If you were to push him back to the 4th, you don't even have to worry about it. You know he's not going to be that guy. It'll technically show him as being listed as the projected starter. He ain't going to start that game. He's going to be traded somewhere. And you'll probably have, I would imagine, Hunter Dobbins start that game for you. So I think that's the way they're probably going to go over the course of the next week. The Dobbins part seems less certain than the Quinn Mathews part, but at a minimum, I would guess they've got a deal lined up sooner rather than later for Dustin May to make the move possible with Quinn Mathews to bring him up to the big league roster.
Yeah, I think you probably see him start this weekend because I think you're right. I think they're kind of setting this up. I mean, they didn't skip his start for no reason. So they're going to call him up. He can make that start either for Leahy, and then Leahy bumps back, and then you replace Liberatore in that case, or like you're saying that you could potentially have him start over the weekend. And then I think by pushing back May as well, it just buys you more time, and also then that's how you can recall Dobbins, because once you trade a player, there no longer is the 15 days that it's required for a pitcher to be in the minors. I think you're going to see both those guys within the next 4 days before we get to the trade deadline. I won't guarantee this weekend just in case it takes a little bit longer to get a May deal done. But yeah, you're going to see Quinn Mathews, and that's exciting. This last 2 weeks, 3 weeks for the Cardinals, it's not been fun baseball to watch. So they need a little bit of youthful energy, not so much to try and help them get to the playoffs, just to kind of re-energize the fan base a little bit, right? We've seen Quinn Mathews start to go on a tear down in the minor league level. He's clearly ready to try and conquer this next step up here at the major league level. I'm fascinated to see how he plays, because I think there's a chance that he's going to, I said this on air and I'm going to say it here too, a Snell-esque profile. And what I mean by that is, I don't know that he's going to allow a ton of hits when he gets up here. I think his bigger problem is going to be walks early on. And that was his big problem last year at the minor league level, where you looked at it and you're like, man, opponents are hitting like 200 against this guy. They're not slugging at all. He's walking the world, though. And I think you could see that be part of his problem when he gets up here.
Yeah, I think that's in play. And I would say give some grace to Quinn Mathews. We've seen this where he gets to another level and there is an adjustment period that takes place with him at times. But when he adjusts, boy, does it look good. And this year, in his last 10 starts, basically, it's looked really good. He's thrown 52 innings over that stretch, has 59 strikeouts over that stretch, and has a 1.5 ERA. He's allowed a total of 9 earned runs in his last 9 starts. That will play. So I've been wondering, when is the time? When is the time? When can you finally call this guy up? It appears that we're there. And now is apparently the time as we get into early August. This is a guy that we've talked about it all year. You don't know how many of the current players are expected to be a part of the core long term. I would say in the rotation, the only guy I feel confident in that is Michael McGreevy. And on the position player side, I think Jordan Walker is part of your core long term. I think J.J. Weatherholt is part of your core long term. Mason Wynn might be part of that. Alec Burleson and Ivan Herrera might be part of that. More on that later today. But I think Quinn Mathews should be a part of that. The expectation, the hope, the belief is that Quinn Mathews should be a top half of the rotation starter for the St. Louis Cardinals when they're good again. And to see somebody like that make their debut in a season like this, that is both meaningful and a hell of a lot of fun. So I do hope that it gives them some kind of energy. My caution would be, look at what Luis Gastelum has become for the Cardinals in their bullpen. Gastelum has an 80 grade changeup. It seems as though one of the best pitches for Quinn Mathews is his changeup. Now, he also has some slider stuff to go along with it, especially against lefties, but I'm just going to be really curious what he looks like against right-handed hitters. That may require some adjustment period, but long-term, I do believe in the talent here, and I think he's going to be really good for the Cardinals.
Yeah, and I like the fact that they're going to try and get him up here sooner rather than later.
Agreed.
Because the more just data points that you can get on how your stuff plays at the big leagues really benefits you as you go into an offseason, when the expectation will be, hey, this is going to be a guy that's going to be with us on opening day of 2027. Heck, there's a chance he might be your opening day starter in 2027. So I like the fact that they're trying to get him up here rather than doing the whole service time manipulation of, well, what if we waited till September and then we get him to potentially be a rookie of the year going into next year. I like the fact that it looks like they're going to try and do this quicker, because this is what I think the smart organizations do when you do these sell-offs. When guys are ready, you get them here right away so they can just learn what that is like.
Who else do we think we're getting the call up? Let's stick on this for here for just a second, because the Cardinals can make a lot of moves, and there's the potential, like Pedro Pajes. I don't know what the future is going to hold for him here in St. Louis. Nelson Velazquez, he could be the right-handed bat that somebody says, hey, we'll take a lottery ticket prospect and we'll go ahead and take that guy on. Yeah, he strikes out a ton, but there's a potential at least for power. The entire bullpen, God only knows who's going to be here and who's going to be gone by the time this trade deadline comes up. Nootbaar is somebody that has been talked about a ton over the last few months. Who do you think ultimately goes, and what does that mean for prospects that could be up sooner rather than later?
Yeah, so I think you see Quinn Mathews up here, as we've talked about. Hunter Dobbins will be up here, but that may not be more of a trade. That could be more of they just bump Liberatore to the pen. I think they will probably trade Lars Nootbaar, which would clear up the spot for Joshua Baez. I mean, it's clear they seem to be signaling, I should say, that they are going to be in sell mode. And if that's the case, I don't know that there is a reason to hang on to Nootbaar and try and get this done in the offseason when you've got a prospect that's ready to go in Joshua Baez. So I think you're going to see Baez up here. Now, where Nootbaar goes, I don't know because no one's really been connected to him, which is odd. And then I wonder if they try and bring up Leo Bernal as well. Bernal's on the 40-man roster already. Not like that would be a problem if you trade away a catcher. But if they decide to make a move, Bernal's a guy that's been hitting down there in the minor leagues, and based on everything that I've seen on him, they seem to think that he grades out well defensively, which I don't think the three catchers on the roster currently do.
If you do that, are you keeping Crooks up, or are you sending Crooks down to get him more time at AAA and he could start 3 out of every 5 down there? Because if you've got Bernal up, he's playing a lot, I would assume. And Ivan Herrera is still going to get his 2 out of every 5. So do you just say, you know what, Crooks, go ahead and get your time down at AAA, and we'll see you in September when we've got the extra roster spot here?
I mean, that's a good question. I would understand sending him down because you're right, there'd be value in playing him. But at this point, does he have anything to prove at AAA? And
just play?
My answer would probably be keep him up here. I understand what you're saying, play at some point. Like, he's just going to have to figure it out, even though it's limited playing time here.
He's almost never playing. And if you bring up another guy that's going to get more playing time than Pedro Baez, it's going to be even less, I would assume.
Yeah, I don't...
Unless they're done with the Ivan Herrera catching thing.
Which could be possible.
Yeah.
You DH him the rest of the way, and then you've got that open up
and maybe you platoon first base with him.
Yeah, I could see that, where they would go that route, because, I mean, you're not wrong about the Jimmy Crooks of, like, even if Bernal comes up here, you're right. I think Bernal's playing if you're splitting that with Ivan Herrera, so how are you getting at-bats for Crooks? And I would also add into that is, all right, so now they would push back on this, but you selling at the deadline and doing these moves signals you're not completely trying in the second half, which means there's less pinch hitting opportunities, right? The whole point of having Crooks up here currently is in those games where they start Pedro Baez behind the plate. It's late. They decide, you know what, we're going to have a pinch hitter come in here, and then boom, we've got the third catcher in Jimmy Crooks. I don't know how they're going to approach that in the second half. I just don't know that you send Crooks down just because I don't think there's anything for him to prove down there at the minor leagues level. I get what you're saying. It is playing time. It is reps that can help. But at this point, it's more for him about you've got to figure out how to stay ready and be ready to go, even if that means you're only starting once a week as the backup catcher here in St. Louis.
Man, I don't know that there's value in that. Not to the same degree. Like, he started, I think it's 8 of the last 25 games. So he's basically starting 1 out of every 3 right now. And that's with Pedro Baez, who's also starting like 1 out of every 6. So if Baez is starting that few, and I'm expecting more, if you're calling up Leo Bernal, he better be starting more than what Pedro Baez has been. So you're going to probably talk about more of like Crooks is 1 out of 3. Now he's going to 1 out of 6. He's going into the Baez role, and you probably put Bernal into the Crooks role in this scenario. I just don't see value in that. So I would rather have him playing every day. Now, when we get to September, maybe it's a little different. And you call him up as one of your 2 extra players, and he gets to be on the roster for that extra month, and you get him around the coaches, you get him around Yachty as Yachty's around the team for the last month of the season. Like, that is a little different. But for the next month, I think there's potential to say the best thing for Jimmy Crooks, if they're calling up Bernal in this scenario, is for Crooks to go down, Bernal to get that opportunity, and now you see what it looks like between Herrera and Bernal as your 2 catchers primarily at the big league level. All of this is subject to them continuing to put Ivan Herrera as a catcher, though.
Or that Herrera's here.
True.
I mean, if they were to call up Bernal, and maybe they're planning on that, maybe that is more of a signal of what they're trying to do with Ivan Herrera, right? Or Burley, but Burley's name's not been out there. You know, Herrera's name's been the one that's been floated out there by reports. That doesn't mean Burley's not out there, but we know Herrera's out there based on what the reporting seems to suggest. I wonder if this could be a sign of they look at this and say, all right, well, we don't think Herrera's a catcher. We'll bet on Burleson as the left-handed bat at first base. I mean, look at what he does to right-handed pitching. Mm-hmm. Come on. And he's not going to really break the bank, I don't think. So we'll just kind of keep him around. We'll work out a contract extension, whether it be in the offseason or when he gets to free agency. We don't value guys that don't play a position. And that's been the Cardinals' mantra for quite a while. And I understand that, yes, there is a new Pobo. I think Heim kind of views it the same way. I wonder if they actively will listen on Ivan Herrera and try and make something happen at the deadline.
I also wonder if you see Ivan Herrera getting time at first and in the outfield the rest of the way.
I thought about that too, but I don't know if you do that if Baez is up here.
Maybe, but Baez can play in center. I don't think it's something you want him doing every day, but once out of every 3 could be Baez play in center on those days. I know it's not a great outfield defensively, but you have Baez. Yes, exactly. Whatever.
Let's do it on a Quinn day when hopefully the ball's not playing
as much. And now's the experiment part, right? Like you're at the end of the season where the wins and losses are less meaningful. They still matter, but they're less meaningful. And on those days, it's going to be tough to watch at times, no doubt about it. But Herrera's in left and Baez is in center. And for some of the other days, like maybe it's every 3 days, you basically have Herrera going to a new position. Every 4. You've got catcher one day, first base the next, then left field, then DH. And you just continue the rotation the rest of the year. And so for the final 40 games of the regular season, he gets 10 starts at each spot, more or less. And you find out, okay, what's the future hold for him? Where is he going to be best? Can you platoon him at first with Burleson, which basically means 1 out of every 3 days-ish, he gets the start at first. And on those other 2 days, what's the plan? Do you do like 1 DH, 1 first, 1 outfield? Is it 2 DH and 1 first? What's the plan with him long term, and how does that fit into your team build? I think that's something we could find out over the next 40 to 50 games as well. But so that's Bernal on this. We've already mentioned Quinn Mathews. Do you think Dobbins comes up? Do you think they make the switch between Dobbins and Libby?
I think so. I think they know that there's just not much more there for Matthew Liberatore as a starter. Now, there's probably not much of a ceiling on Hunter Dobbins, but I think they like his stuff enough to maybe profile as a back of the rotation arm, a 4 or a 5. So you might as well start him for the final 2 months and see what it looks like when you already know you're not getting an answer on Libby. And I said this last week on the Redbird Report. I think you can still get some value for Liberatore as a bullpen arm by next year's deadline. So I would make that move now, see if his stuff starts to play up, and then you can have a conversation about his future in the offseason.
We mentioned Baez. You think they trade Noot?
I think so, because it's twofold for me. One, if you're going to have kind of a sell-off, he makes a ton of sense with that. Getting a team acquiring him for 2 postseasons, there's going to be some value there. And there's some teams that could use maybe a little bit more on base to add to their lineup, whether that be at the top or more in like the middle 5-6 range. And then the second thing is, I think they think Baez is ready. Now, I know he's gone cold, but I think they want to see what it looks like here 2 months at the major league level. So I think they'll move him. I'm surprised his name's not been out there more connected to teams. I think you got to wait for that right-handed bat market to clear up first, right? As teams start to search for that, who ends up getting moved there, and then do teams that were looking for a right-hand bat just say, you know what, screw it. We'll take a left fielder that plays good defense and can get on base.
The whole bullpen up in the air. We have no clue, right? Like it's O'Brien's name's out there, Stanek's name's out there. I would guess Barul's name is probably out there. And then if you want to talk to them about, Soriano, Graceffo, Gastelum maybe not, but Swanson. Those are probably the guys that are less likely to go. But sure, make us an offer. Let's see if there's something that we'd like to do here. I think JoJo is the one that's almost guaranteed to be gone. He's not currently on the roster, but as a lefty who's been super successful, I would assume there's going to be a market for him. And whenever that happens, I would guess you probably will see a guy that I've been talking about for weeks at this point, Bryson Mott's, finally make his return to the major league level. So within the next week, I think there's a chance that you see Leo Bernal, Joshua Baez, Hunter Dobbins, Quinn Mathews, and Bryson Mott's all on this roster. Is there anybody else that you think could potentially be on the way up by this time next week?
I think you covered the main names. Like maybe there's a bullpen arm I'm not thinking of down there at the minor league level, but I think that's the main names that I would point to for the Cardinals that they're going to be calling up. Because it's maybe Sajaci. And the reason I say that, he's been okay down at the minor league level.
Hitting for power finally.
Yeah, and I wonder if maybe he could get a call up. Like maybe they end up floating out there. And this is one of those where you don't even have to make this move now. I wonder if they float like Fermin out there. Right? Does somebody need a super utility guy that can hit left-handed pitching, has had a pretty good season? I think he's still above league average offensively. Would someone have interest in him? And we can maybe get like a bullpen arm, right? Like think about what they did. It wouldn't be a rental in this case, but think about what they did in the offseason when they flipped Richie Palacios. After he had 2 great months, they flipped him for Andrew Kittredge. So maybe they kind of look for something like that. Edmundo Sosa for JoJo Romero, which Mo did in the past. Luke Voigt for Giovanni Gallegos. Maybe they try something along those lines, and then that's how you end up in a situation where Sajaci ends up here or Prieto ends up here.
By the way, not for nothing. So JC in his last 12 games, 15 for 51, a double, 3 homers, 5 stolen bases. Batting .295 with an OPS of .870 down at the AAA level. Good for him, man. I hope he's able to continue to sustain that, and if he does, maybe we do see him up here sooner rather than later. All right, so that's the potential prospects who could get the call sooner rather than later. Should the Cardinals, if they decide, we've talked about a lot of the different options of what they could do at this year's deadline. Those are the most likely scenarios, what we just discussed. What if they go a little more pie in the sky? They go big game hunting. They decide to make a big move that's typically reserved for the offseason, but with the CBA negotiations coming, they're looming. Do they do something like that at this year's trade deadline? And if so, what could that look like? We'll talk about that next year on the Redbird Report. I want to preface this by saying I don't think anything we're about to talk about is likely to happen. This is pie in the sky, but like in the NBA, T-Bot, I don't know how much you listen to this stuff, but I listen to a lot of NBA podcasts, and a lot of the time you'll hear the fake trades, right? And so people just go in and they talk about, if this were to happen, what would it look like? That's what I want to spend the next 5 minutes or so doing here on the Redbird Report. So if you could make a move where you add a legit big league talent, I'm talking guys that have multiple years of club control remaining, and they could come in and immediately be a part of your core. What would you want to do? Guys that I throw into this mix that I've at least seen in discussions of possibly being traded this year. Hunter Green, starting pitcher from the Reds. We've talked about Detmers and Soriano from the Angels. Joe Ryan with the Twins. It sure seems as though they're not selling at this point, though. Emerson Hancock, or any starting pitcher from the Seattle Mariners. Michael King, Michael Wacha. Those are the pitchers that I think fit into this criteria that have, again, at least been mentioned as possible trade deadline acquisitions. On the position player side, all of these names have been mentioned at some point. Jackson Holliday with the Orioles. That's a new one thrown into the mix. Zach Neto with the LA Angels. Adley Rutschman also with the Orioles. Otto Lopez from the Marlins. Jarren Duran with the Red Sox. Or Matt Chapman, very old, very expensive, with the San Francisco Giants. I hope I sold that well. Are any of those names people that jump out to you as T-Bone, players that you would like to see the Cardinals target and aggressively pursue at this year's trade deadline?
Yeah, I find Otto Lopez very interesting from the position player side of things. He's really the only one on that list that I heard that I'd have a ton of interest in. Jackson Holliday's interesting. I just think for what the cost is, you're going to live to regret that trade, because I think Holliday's a good player, not a great player, and you're going to have to give up a great return to go get him. In terms of trading, probably like a Liam Doyle to make it happen, and I'm out on that conversation. Otto Lopez is interesting, but this is a classic, why are the Marlins listening to a guy that's got control, that's 27 years old and plays a premium position at shortstop?
Other than that, though.
Yeah, other than that, though, what am I missing? Now, is he going to be a 329 hitter the rest of his career? No, probably not. Nobody else really does that, except for Luis Ariz. But I think he's better than Ariz. He's got good contact skills. He's got decent pop. I mean, he's slugging .490 on the season and gets on base at a pretty good clip. Now, that on base is living higher up because of the average, because he's not a guy that draws walks. He's only 16th percentile in walk rate so far on the season. But he is interesting, and I am open to the idea of trying to upgrade the shortstop position. A lot of people might think that if you're acquiring Otto Lopez, I know like Alex mentioned today, hey, maybe you put him at third base. I would be making this move to upgrade short and then using Wynn as an asset to try and make something else happen, at whether it be the deadline or in the offseason, trying to figure it out, because I'm not convinced that Mason Wynn is the long-term answer at shortstop for the St. Louis Cardinals. And since there's a bunch of shortstops that are floating out here on the market, I think you have to call and see what they are looking for to make this happen.
I find him interesting. He's also been DFA'd multiple times. And the reason that I bring that up is because typically, if you're a great player, you don't get DFA'd multiple times. Maybe he's a late bloomer, but guys that are late bloomers, a lot of the time, and maybe this is unfair, they are not valued the same across Major League Baseball as guys that previously were higher value targets. So Jackson Holliday, I think is probably, despite having a much worse season this year, going to have significantly more value across Major League Baseball than Otto Lopez. Just to use those two names as examples, I wonder if he ends up going for less than what we're currently thinking right now, where you look at the production and you're like, why isn't he going for more? He's a really good defensive shortstop this year. He runs the bases well. He hits for a little bit of pop. He's 27 years old, 3 years of club control. That should get you a lot. Maybe it doesn't. maybe teams are every bit as skeptical as the Marlins appear to be, and the Marlins decide to cash in on this asset that they basically got for nothing. They do what the Cardinals are kind of doing right now with Dustin May, but with multiple years of club control remaining, or what the Cardinals very well may do with Riley O'Brien, who they got kind of in a similar way, where it was a scrap heap option. They go get him, they fix him, and they end up giving him to somebody else who's ready to win right now. I find him interesting. I would probably be more like Alex in that if you're going to do that, I would probably view Otto Lopez as my third baseman, not as my shortstop answer. If you want somebody, though, to upgrade, I am very interested in Jackson Holliday. I agree with you. I don't know if the superstar talent is there, but I'd like to buy into it and bet on it to see what that looks like. I'll give you one other name that I find to be really interesting, T-Bone, and I don't know what the cost would look like on this. My guess, astronomical. But would you be willing to offer Liam Doyle in a package for Hunter Green?
No. And the reason I say that is I like Hunter Green. He's got really good stuff. I feel like he's never healthy.
He's not.
And that's a problem for me.
He started more than 25 games once in his major league career, and that's really just like by default. He started 26 games that year.
Yeah, and you only get him. Now, 3 years of control is still quite a bit.
That's real.
But I don't have as much interest in Hunter Green just because I have some questions about his health for the long term. And I don't want to give up Liam Doyle, 6 years of control, a guy that you hope ends up with Hunter Green-esque stuff for a guy that hasn't been able to stay healthy. And I'll be curious to see how the rest of his season goes, too, right? He just came back from injury, and he sucks since coming back from injury.
He's been so bad.
And we know how this goes for pitchers, right? It takes one injury, and it's gone like that. So, and I'm not saying that's going to happen to Hunter Green, but that alone is just enough of a cautionary tale for me to say no.
I would be super intrigued by him. I can't help myself. I can't contain myself when you've got like, hey, 6'5", 250 pounds, throws hard, big time swing and miss, has shown an ability to be like legitimately in the Cy Young conversation already in his career. You don't have to worry about the development. He's striking out more than a batter per inning. Like if this goes well, if he regains his form, that's a number one starter at the major league level. There's no dreaming on it. There's no squinting and tilting your head. No, that guy is a legit number one starter right now. And he's cheap and cost controlled. He's already on a contract extension that he signed to buy out a couple of his arbitration years, and it never gets overly expensive for you. So Hunter Green to me is a guy that I would dream on, and I would definitely really consider making that move. I don't think the Reds are going to trade him, and I certainly don't think they're going to trade him within the division. And if they did, my guess is you'd have to pay a tax on it. So I think you're talking about Doyle plus if you're going to make a move like this. So I don't see it as realistic, but if I was to name who the guys are on that list that I just read earlier that I would be most interested in, it's twofold. One, Jackson Holliday, and two, Hunter Green. I would dream for the highest possible upside and go make a move like that. That being said, I do think there are a lot of people that are dreaming on the upside of one Cardinals player right now and to see if they could get their hands on him. That player is Ivan Herrera. T-Bone, I read this piece earlier today from Ken Rosenthal, and I wanted to get your thoughts on how it applies to Ivan Herrera. Everything I'm about to read, you may be surprised by this, is actually not about Ivan Herrera. It's about the Rockies catcher who is also right-handed and potentially available in the trade market. Here we go. 3 AL East teams, including the Rays, the Red Sox, and the Yankees, are among those that have expressed varying degrees of interest in Goodman. The Rockies, however, face no urgency to move him as he is under control for 3 additional seasons. Sound familiar? They're asking for a multiplayer package led by a team's number 1 prospects. Now, for the Rays, that's Theo Gillen, who is a stud, top 15 prospect in all of Major League Baseball. For the Red Sox, it's Franklin Arias, who is again a top 15 prospect in all of Major League Baseball. We continue with Ken Rosenthal. With 4 days to go until the trade deadline, why not? It's the usual dance that you get at this time of the year. Goodman is 26. He's not simply a Coors creation. He's tied for 3rd in the majors with 31 home runs, and 18 of those have come on the road. His OPS on the road actually ranked 5th in Major League Baseball, while some rival evaluators express concern about his defense. He's a rarity in the market in 2 ways. 1, he's right-handed. 2, he's a catcher. All of that outside of basically the power applies to Ivan Herrera, who I do believe his power is somewhat suppressed by Busch Stadium as well. So what's helping boosts the value for a guy like Goodman is actually suppressing the value offensively for a guy like Ivan Herrera. If that's the potential asking price for a similar kind of a player, T-Bone, in Goodman to Ivan Herrera, is that the kind of package that you would be interested in that could entice you to trade Ivan Herrera at this year's deadline?
Yeah, it'd have to be. And I would listen to those kind of packages. Like, I think that Theo Gillen's going to be a stud for Tampa Bay. I mean, you're talking about a guy that could potentially, you acquire him. He's a center fielder, left-handed bat. He's probably your starting center fielder within 2 years. 2028, by the time you get Rodriguez up here as your starting catcher or whatever position they have him, with Baez in the outfield, kind of that next wave that comes up with Walker and Weatherholt while they're here already. I would listen and see if you can get one of these kind of returns. Now, it would have to be that kind of return, right? I agree with what Ken just said. It almost have to be the top prospect from the Rays, the Red Sox, the Yankees, whoever it is that wants to make that deal. And then also adding in probably like some complementary pieces in it, like maybe it's some pitching that's in like that 15 to 30 range in their prospect system that you really like, one or two of those guys. But yeah, I would listen. Now, do I think they're going to make that offer? No, because we never see these kind of prospects really get dealt unless A.J. Preller's the guy doing it.
The Red Sox, I don't know. I can't rule them out with something like this. Truly, I can't do it.
I don't think Breslow will do something this big of a swing.
Can I give you the scenario that maybe he would?
Sure.
I think if they trade for an Otto Lopez, just to use him as the example, or a Zach Neto, just to use him as the example as well, what if they go out there and make that move for the shortstop position and then use their shortstop prospect to go get themselves another bat to potentially go really big at this year's deadline?
Yeah, I mean, that would make some sense because you're blocking the shortstop.
Exactly.
I just wonder if they would wait and see of what they could get for him in the offseason, right?
It's
now,
possible.
I say that, and there may not be much of an offseason to try and make these kind of moves. Like, I doubt we have the winter meetings next year because of the labor dispute that's going to happen. So the reason I bring that up is I just don't know if they're in a position to be pulling all these wild trades to try and really upgrade that roster. Now, the AL is very weak. Maybe Breslow sees that, and it is going to operate more like a A.J. Preller. Certainly didn't see him trading kind of early to go out there and get a right-handed bat that's only done it once in Meade. Mm-hmm. Now, that trade already is not aging well, but that was just unfortunate circumstances. But, I mean, maybe that does end up happening. I could see that scenario because Breslow is a bit of a wild card. Now, he hasn't learned yet that he's lost a lot of trades so far, but I will, until I see it happen, this is kind of like what I would say about first-round picks being traded in the NHL draft, and I was wrong this time around. It never really happens, and until I actually start seeing it becoming more normal, then will I be willing to say teams are going to be willing to give up these kind of prospects, because these aren't just top prospects in their system. These are top 20 prospects across baseball.
Yeah.
Those guys never get moved.
I agree with you. I do not think it's going to happen. If they offered this for Ivan Herrera, I understand why the Cardinals would be listening. That's the kind of package that's hard to ignore. Like, we just talked about how with Liam Doyle, we'd be very hesitant to move him in really just about any package. These guys are higher rated prospects than Liam Doyle. We're very excited about Rainiel Rodriguez, right? Mm-hmm. These guys are rated higher in their systems than Rainiel Rodriguez is in the Cardinal system. Like that is what we're talking about here. That level of prospect pedigree. We're all excited about what J.J. Weatherholt has been this year. That's the prospect pedigree that these guys carry. Like that level of a prospect right now in minor league baseball. So, yeah, I think you have to consider it. Last thing on this before we get out of here, T-Bone. Would you prefer to get a pitching prospect or a position player prospect if you were to cash in on the Ivan Herrera chip?
I would probably shoot for a position player prospect. I think you can never have enough pitching, but I think you've got a decent amount of those high upside arms already. I would like to add one more high upside position player to come up here, whether it be the center fielder, as I had mentioned, the kid from the Tampa Bay Rays, or the Red Sox, or Yankees guys, which are shortstops. You can move those guys to third base, or if you don't believe in Mason Winn as the long-term answer, you could put them at shortstop. I think you need one more position player to kind of come up with Rodriguez and Baez that then kind of merge in as that kind of secondary core with Walker, Weatherholt, and Burleson that are here already. So I would target position player because I also think that's the thinnest part of their prospect pipeline. Outside Rodriguez, Baez, they don't really have a ton of like high-level prospects just yet. They've got interesting guys like Ty Pete's interesting, what he's been doing so far this year. I know Jesus Baez has had a pretty good year down there in high A, I think is where he's at.
Double A.
Or double A, excuse me. So they've had some guys that have done fairly well. I still don't know about the ceiling on those guys. I want a really high ceiling prospect to add to that pipeline.
All right, call your shot. Let's end it with this. Who gets traded? Because the next time that we talk, we will be recapping the Major League Baseball trade deadline. We'll have a live show 6 p.m. on Monday. So anybody listening right now, 6 p.m. on Monday on 101 ESPN, we'll have a live show breaking down, recapping whatever happens between now and then for the trade deadline. Who do you think gets traded from the current Cardinals roster?
I think Dustin May is gone.
Agreed.
I think you will see Lars Nootbaar get dealt.
Agreed.
I'm going to leave myself with a little bit of wiggle room here. I'm going to say a catcher. I'm not sure which one.
You got to call it.
I'm going to say they won't deal Herrera. I'll say it's Baez. They do something small with Baez.
Agreed.
And then in the bullpen, I think you see Soriano dealt. I think you see O'Brien dealt, Burrell and Stanek.
Wow. Okay, so that's more than what I had. I had Nelson Velasquez also getting dealt as a position player.
Yeah.
And then from the bullpen, I've got O'Brien, Romero, Stanek. I think
I
those
forgot
are the
about
three
Romero. Yeah, I would put Romero on my list too.
It's going to be a fascinating 72, 96 hours for the St. Louis Cardinals. A lot of potential movement could be coming your way. And it sucks that they've entered into seller mode. But, man, it's exciting to see what the team could look like down the stretch with some of this young talent potentially taking the place of Baez, Noot, Velasquez, May, and some of the pitching as well. So we will certainly be staying tuned for all of that.
Quick question for you,
Please.
since we're talking about that, since we're calling shots. Would you be frustrated if they don't trade one of the controllable pieces, not named Herrera, because I think he's more of a long shot. I think like the guys that we've talked about, like Nootbaar, O'Brien, I'll throw Soriano in there. He's got so much control and he's been good.
I don't feel the same urgency to move on from Nootbaar that everybody else does. I think it's fine if they keep him. I would prefer to move on, but if they don't get a deal that's commensurate with his value, whatever. They can do that in the offseason. They could also do it at next year's trade deadline. So I'm not overly worried about that one. If they don't trade Baez, I'd be a little disappointed because he just doesn't have a future here. And this is such a catching, craved market that he makes sense for so many of these other teams. According to everybody in baseball, he's a good defender, he's a great game caller, and he learns his pitchers quickly. If that's true, that's exactly the kind of catcher that a lot of these teams want to add at the trade deadline. So I think he will be traded ultimately, and I would be a little disappointed if they don't. O'Brien's the other one where it just comes down to the offers. If you're not getting anything that makes sense for you, sure, I get how you wouldn't trade him. But given where the Cardinals are at, given his value, and honestly, given my lack of trust in his future, I think he's somebody that you should probably sell at this year's trade deadline. Again, unless other teams view it the same way I do, which is we don't trust him either.
Yeah, O'Brien's the one for me that really stands out. It would remind me of like what happened with JoJo last year.
Yeah.
I still can't believe they didn't trade JoJo Romero last year at the deadline.
Agreed.
That's really the only one, because I'm with you. Nootbaar you could get done in the offseason if you want to. I would actively be trying to shop him just so you can clear a spot for Baez, and then you don't force one of those guys to go play in center field, which is not their best position. They're more corner outfielders. Baez, I get what you're saying. I just assume he's going to be either traded or optioned to the minors. I think O'Brien's definitely the one. And even though, like, you and I agree, I get a little bit of the heebie-jeebies when he comes in because I get a little nervous, I don't think teams look at that. I don't think they're going by what their gut tells them. I think they're looking at the underlying metrics. And the underlying metrics tell you, you want to trade for that guy. This guy can help you in October. And with his control, it doesn't make sense to hold on to him if you're the Cardinals and at his age.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. Appreciate you guys tuning in to this week's edition of the Redbird Report. Always appreciate Noah for helping us out on the video side of things. As I mentioned, it will not be the typical full week wait for us to come back for a new edition of the Redbird Report. We will break down each and everything that happens at the Major League Baseball trade deadline as it pertains to your St. Louis Cardinals next Monday night as the Cardinals are officially on the clock. I think we're going to see a decent amount of trades this year from them. I do not think it's going to lack for activity. We'll break it all down for you guys on Monday. For Tanner, Noah, I'm BK. We'll talk to you then here on the Redbird Report.
Find every episode of the Redbird Report with Brandon Kiley and Tanner Hendrickson on YouTube or at 101ESPN.com.